morning, everyone. And thank you for being here with us on the talk on AI today. In the next hour, we will be discussing the rise and evolution of AI and the future perspectives we see there. My name is Lusine, and I'm the CRO of Ardshinbank, and I will moderate this very interesting discussion. For this, we have brought up together a lineup of experts who are leading the AI evolution, and they are leaders in the phase. So I would like to present you Martin Martinov. He is the Vice President of Emerging and Digital Markets from JP Morgan. Owen O'Neill, Applied AI Researcher at AI Hub of the Bank of New York. Alessandro Castelnuovo, Head of Responsible AI at Intesa San Paolo. And Lavi Singh, Co-founder and Chief Operating Officer at Orbitron AI. Thank you, gentlemen, for joining us. So let's start maybe with you, Martin. How would you describe the AI moment we are right now in? And what do you think? Are we genuinely different from the technological waves we've been before? Or maybe we are just mistaking velocity for transformation? What do you think?
Thank you, Lusine. Very good question. I think in terms of velocity and transformation, it's both. And what's most interesting is the gap between the two. Granted, this new technology of AI is something unprecedented, because for the first time, we have a system that can be operated in a very plain language, so it doesn't need a person to stand in the middle between machine and the end user. In this sense, it has the capacity to revolutionize companies, industries, and countries. But I'd say that whatever we now think of as transformation is mainly velocity. Because, for example, me opening an LLM and using it to draft an email, to summarize a document, it's more about adoption. It doesn't change the process fundamentally. If we want to see the genuine transformation, it's about rebuilding the process, the system, the entire organization around the tool that's recently become available. This is very slow, costly, and mainly hasn't happened yet. Whenever it starts happening, we are most likely to see what we call a J curve, so the output of once again, the company, the system in general will slowly fall, because we're basically rebuilding the tool to adopt a new system. And only then it will rise once we're past this inflection point. We believe that the companies that are likely to gain the most from the whole transformation system are the companies that will be built either as AI first or will apply the algorithms on a very fundamental level. So for now, we see lots of adoption. We see the starting of transformation, but we are not fully there.
Yeah. You know, we hear a lot of jargon like machine learning, deep learning, natural language processing, or generative AI. And they are different in their capabilities, right? What distinct risk profiles do they introduce? Do we really need to differentiate between those in our mitigation approaches? Alessandro, what would you say?
Thank you, Lusine, and hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. Yeah, the technological framework on AI is very different right now, and it continues to evolve. And it is really important to understand the technologies, because behind every technology there are different risks. For example, starting with the classical machine learning, here we have risk, but at least in company we have our own data that we use to train our own models. And here the problem are like data quality. If the data are without quality, we cannot have good performance. Problem of opacity, so there are mainly black box models, so we need explainability to understand how to operate this model. And we have fairness problem. So this model impact lives. They are using to take decision, granting loans, or deciding to hiring people. So it's very important to verify that they have no bias and they are fair in the results. But when we go to generative AI, we have other different level of problem. First of all, companies are not autonomous on building their own generative model. They have to use a GPI model from the markets. So you have a problem, for example, on the intellectual property or privacy problem. You don't know the data that are used to train that model. And then, since they are applied to the generate text, you have a problem like toxicity content or content with stereotyping, which is connected with reputational risk for a company. But also, they can produce hallucination. So the content that seems real, but they are not indeed. There is a story about the Australian government that have to publish a report. They asked a consultant firm to produce these reports, and then came out from researchers that some quotes in this report were invented. So it was built through artificial intelligence, but it was not checked. So this is create an issues. And of course, vulnerability. These systems are vulnerable from prompt injection. It brings also to a different level of risk in security. Finally, getting to agentic AI, we introduce the problem of autonomy. We ask this system to perform tasks with autonomy. They are an architecture of different agents. And here, the risk could be operatively, so they interact, they can go to infinite loop, for example, and this brings costs to the company, but also goal misalignment, and I think more seriously, the losing of accountability from the people.
Yeah, and in regards to our daily lives and routines, yeah. Most people, we do use AI to write emails or perform single tasks, simple ones. But how do we go to generally transferring those processes into transforming the workflows themselves? What do you think, Owen?
Yeah, I think AI as a productivity tool is the first experience a lot of people have with this technology. And it's very useful. So you have your kind of ChatGPT or Claude window and your email window. And you give it all the information and it spits out a nice draft for you and make a few tweaks and send it off. The kind of friction point there is the AI in that context is a blank slate. So it doesn't have any information about your job, about what the email should be, about the recipients. You have to kind of dump all that information very manually in there. So the key to moving from AI is kind of, that's like a useful tool, to really transforming it is embedding it into your workflows. So you minimize the distance between the AI and where the work is actually being done. You give it all the information that it needs to complete the task, and obviously put in all the appropriate protections as well. So in the email example, it could move to something like Copilot, where it's embedded into your Outlook. It has access to your email chains. It can see all the previous conversation. But to go beyond that, you can do things like providing it with your meeting transcripts, so it can see what the latest conversations are on this project, access to kind of company databases about internal policies, recent client activity, and even to the broader internet, to give it even more context into this kind of activity. And this means when you ask it to draft me an email, it has all the information it already needs to create a much, much better draft, and saves you all the legwork of kind of manually providing it the context or looking up the information yourself. So this is very useful in the productivity example, but it applies in all deployments of AI in a company. The deeper you integrate it, the more information sources you give it access to, that's when you really start to see it less as kind of a cool demo or a dashboard and more of a transformative tool.
Yeah. So it's actually right for the private persons. And what about the companies? We very often stand at a dilemma, whether buying an AI agent or product or a model even, or creating it ourselves. And the bigger banks have this question very often put by their shareholders or the company managers. What would you say, Lavi?
Beautiful question, Lusine. Actually, build versus buy, I believe it's the wrong axis. and I fundamentally believe that there are things that, the real question is that, what do you really want to own, and what do you want to rent? And that's how you need to figure it out. AI is I think what you typically do is you rent the intelligence, and you need to own the governance. Let's break it down a bit, right? So you have the platform, right, which basically builds and decides the rules of the play, the rules of the game. On top of that, it sits the model. And you will typically, no matter what solution you're solving, whatever you build right now, you'll probably change the model 3 times in the next 3 months because the world is changing, right? What you need to own is your governance, which is a control mechanism that you need to decide. The proprietary information that you're feeding in, that Owen was talking about, the governance, all of that, that's what you need to own. And that's the way we need to go about it. From an organization standpoint, the typical institutions, when they're differentiating between build versus buy, you can have the global organizations where they've spent billions, couple of billions, in building the infrastructure. And what does that tell us? It's hard, and it takes a lot of money to be able to do that. But at the same time, you have invested in something which is a depreciating asset. So do you want to do that? Whereas on the other side, you will have a corporate will say, let me just buy off-the-shelf SaaS solution. But that solution is not built on your data. It's not using your information. It's not built on your context. That's the other challenge. So how do you go about it, right? You need to then work with the platform developers, right, to say, okay, I'm going to buy it, and that's ours, and you should be comfortable with that. The model, make it agnostic. Why does it matter? Of course, within the regulatory environment of what you are in, you can have tens of those. It's like, if I may, you're flirting with all of them, right? You change whichever works, whichever makes sense, and based on the problem that you're solving. Governance is where you want to have control. This is what you want to hang on to. You decide the rules. When we were kids, right, your parents said, unless you're in my roof, you play by my rules. AI needs to play by rules of yours that you decide. And that's the way you need to go about it. Just rent the intelligence, I would say, and own the governance.
So now you touched a tender point. Governance, risk management, little of it. So in financial institutions, we all start normally with some machine learning model that produces loans. That's the first step very often. But then we go beyond, and many financial institutions, your esteemed institutions, have gone much further. What is your experience, Owen?
Yes, so we see in the news a lot that a lot of companies are struggling to see value from AI. At BNY, I think we are definitely converting this technology into value. So very early on, we launched our kind of AI hub within the bank, and since then, back around the ChatGPT moment, and since then we have over 200 kind of AI projects that are in production that we are directly seeing value from. And I think this comes down to a couple of different kind of aspects. The first is discipline in choosing where you devote your AI resources to. It's very tempting to kind of slap AI on every new project that's coming out for kind of PR reasons. But we had a very kind of disciplined approach where the technology has to be feasible for the given deployment and also has to clearly have a major impact. And this avoids us kind of wasting time on less relevant deployments. And this means that a lot of projects that are proposed at the bank, maybe they don't make it through the governance process, or maybe they're cancelled halfway through, but that's fine, because it means that the projects that do make it are really relevant and impactful. The second is reusability of this technology. So when you let loose a technology like AI within a bank, like Martin said, the technical barrier to entry has been removed. Anyone can interact with these chatbots in natural language. There can be cases of many people at different ends of the bank reinventing the wheel. So again, it's very important to identify those cases. So for example, an AI agent that can extract structured information from a particular regulatory report. Rather than having 5 or 6 different teams build that same pipeline, create a standardized version that can be reused across the bank. And this drastically reduces duplicated effort and again helps focus our efforts on AI and see more value. And the final part is the integration aspect, which I touched on earlier. A lot of this is giving the AI safe, secure access to all the different types of information within the company. And a lot of this is less kind of flashy demos and more kind of hard engineering to build the pipelines that connect the AI to all the different systems, to make sure they're reliable and at least as safe as the process that they might replace. And a lot of that work goes unnoticed in the background, but it's vital if you want to really integrate AI into your company and start to convert it from the kind of blank slate AI deployment to one that's really starting to feel like a superpower at your company.
I mean, we'll come back to this question regarding the guardrails, because once we celebrate the AI, how much it changed us, how much it continues bringing a lot of positive impact into our businesses. But the guardrails are the second side that should be always discussed. But if we come back to the people, I mean, most people, they use AI occasionally. They think they use AI occasionally. They enter the phone and then they ask a question to ChatGPT or whatever. But it does already shape our lives, sometimes unwillingly or not even noticing that. What changes our life and how our lives will be changed when the societies become more dependent on the systems they don't even notice. So one thing is when you know what you do, you use with the idea behind to use AI explicitly for this reason. And the other thing is when you use it, you are dependent on it, but you don't even realize that. What do you think, Martin?
That's a very good distinction, Lusine, about exactly us using AI as a tool with a healthy degree of skepticism versus having AI as an environment that we constantly live in without even understanding that. And I'd say this introduces two main problems. First of all, the thing that Luve mentioned already, there is a big problem of concentration right now because we all tend to use the same few models from like 5-6 labs based in 2, maximum 3 countries, which probably means that the day that something fails, it'll fail at scale in many different domains, let's say that. That's a big issue, of course. It's systemic, but it's in certain degree solvable because in an operational way we can once again introduce more guardrails. Whatever infrastructure that you lose, like we've seen, for example, during the recent Middle Eastern conflict, that data centers have become a new, legitimate or not, military target when Iran, I believe, had an attack on certain drone. Whatever operational dependence you have on technology, on AI, this can be remediated. Like, worst case, if your PowerPoint fails, you'll complain for a while and then go back and do this nice slide in Microsoft Paint. But a bigger problem is when the AI shapes the way that you comprehend information and look at the world. For example, already your social media feed is curated by AI. Your web search results are curated by AI. The news that you see as the pre-selected top news are also filtered by AI. And here we run into a problem of if we outsource the way that we're thinking, it won't be as easy to go back as if we just like outsource a simple routine task. So the main problem is, once again, to fully understand who controls the decisions that we take, who controls the overall narrative, who controls the compute, the training, the inference in that, and make sure that all of these decisions are done in a responsible way. So that, first of all, no malicious actor can get hold of these things. And second, so that there is not a systemic failure that can undermine us on an operational, civilizational even level.
I think if I may add over there, Martin, I think the fundamental thing to have the right balance is a human in the loop. Right? That's the way to bridge the gap, making sure that controls are in place and the decision-making sits with the human no matter what. And that's the way to go about it.
Absolutely.
And we are still discussing traditional AI, right? Now, what is the impact of moving from traditional AI towards generative AI and increasingly to agentic AI? And do we need fundamentally to rethink how we structure our risk assessment framework? I would like Alessandro to answer this.
Yeah, the game is changing, of course. So we used to use risk framework in order to validate model, right? So with classical machine learning, is pretty clear how to make a validation because we control the data, we know the ground truth, and we can build performance and understand the threshold to accept or not a model. But with the Gen AI, the tasks are totally different. They are more contextual. Maybe we ask to produce a summarization, a note, a commercial pitch. So how can we validate that? You say, of course, it's important controls. But for validate control that, maybe most of the time, you need to require some LLM as a judge. So you are bringing generative AI to judge generative AI. And this is a second order problem. So who validates the validator? But right now, of course, you can use human in the loop, but you are building generative AI to efficiency process. You can still maintain human in the loop or on the loop, but the human cannot control every instance. So yes, we want to control generative AI, but the street right now is going towards using LLM to evaluate other LLMs.
So you don't want to make our life easy, no? Just complicate even more. Like, I mean, we are all working in companies where there is a huge number of sensitive, important information is kept. Personal information, banking secrecy, whatever. And it depends on the company. Each company defines its own rules, sometimes very strict, sometimes more liberal. And we cannot say 100% what information our employees do fit into the AIs in order to get some analysis and be more efficient, reach their KPIs in times. I mean, all of us inclusive may have these faults, right? Now, if I take into the context also the part of hallucinations of AIs, I would wonder what you would say on this, Lavi. What shall we do to go forward more securely and efficiently?
Thank you. There's two fears that you say in the question, right? So one, you're saying, do we have the right regulations in place? Do we know what are we doing and how are we going to do it? And second, our models hallucinate, right? So how do we play? I want to beat them both. I want to decide the rules, where you decide the regulations, you decide how you're going to run your company. Because at the end of the day, you're trying to be, you want to be competitive. That's what you're trying to do. You want to put the right controls in place, and that's all you need. I would actually build the governance around it, and I won't trust the model. And the governance will be good enough to actually make both regulator and the model irrelevant. Why don't we do that? Let's also understand, I think the models are trained based on the data, right? Based on the pattern synthesis, right? That's how they function. Now, but the parameter of how they work, that's purely sits in your hands in every shape or form, and that's up to you.
If I may add on that point,
sure.
One important consideration in these governance layers that we add is the end user experience. So you have to make sure you have the appropriate protections, but it can't feel like too much of a hindrance to innovation for your employees, because if it gets too burdensome, they might switch to using ChatGPT on their phone or in a different environment, which introduces a whole host of other risks. But even if you kind of improve your protections and lock those down, then nobody can use AI, and that kind of, you lose out on all this new technology. So it's very important that when you're adding these protections, that they're integrated well, that the employees are educated about them, and they can, just be a part of the AI project lifecycle rather than this big overhead they have to factor in.
Interesting. You know, I was thinking, well, there is a big battle right now. What is AI? Is this just another phase of industrial revolution? Or that's something completely different, right? So, for example, we in the banks, we approve loans, do some processing. Is this just about the speed? That AI does the things faster and maybe with a higher quality? Or it's just a different process where AI thinks for us? And now the question, will we trust the machines more than humans in a certain period of time from now on? What do you think?
Yeah, so I would make a distinction between maybe kind of more rudimentary, mundane tasks that Martin touched on. So using AI in these cases is much more like process automation. So you have a very kind of repetitive task like repairing a very set form of trades, classifying documents, things like that. In this case, you deploy AI, you test it appropriately. It's very kind of set use case. So you can do quite robust testing, monitoring, and so on in these cases. And you can make it so that the AI is essentially safe and reliable and better than the process that it was being done before. The other use case is when AI starts to become more of a thought partner in more complex decisions. So when you're using AI to decide on what kind of project your team is going to pursue next, or maybe what type of vendor that you're going to explore a relationship with. I don't see a scenario in the near future where AI is going to wholesale take over those type of decisions. I see it more as a kind of assistant to the human. So the AI can take over a lot of the manual, mundane aspects. They can do the legwork of searching through thousands of different documents, pulling out the relevant information, synthesizing information from lots of different sources, doing kind of deep research across the web and across other financial information sources, and present that in a way to the human where they can review it, they can kind of verify its authenticity, and make a much more informed decision, given all this additional context that they have. But I think the final decision will come down to in the computer for the AI to access. So definitely in the near future, I see the AI as a kind of a partnership, as an assistant to the human to help make better decisions. And I think we're quite a bit away from just being able to sit back and let the AI take over for 8 hours a day.
Let me contradict you then. I'll now jump into controversy of saying, if at some point there are better judgments in medicine, laws, or education within AI rather than concentrated in humans, would we trust those judgments? Because one thing is doing things faster, the other thing is coming to certain conclusions based on conscience or based on internal algorithms that is close to human conscience. Now, having this in mind, what do you think, Martin? How could AI in its development impact capitalism and maybe democracy?
That's a very interesting question, Lusine. First of all, to touch upon, maybe like to slightly shadow what Owen was saying, we do see two fairly contradicting trends in terms of AI adoption. On one sense, on one hand, there is some sort of AI appreciation, where we want to go with an AI answer, and we see sometimes people are trusting it too blindly, versus a certain degree of AI aversion. Once you see that AI made a mistake, you tend to trust it less.
Yes.
I think this depends on the type of question you want to answer. Now, back to your question on AI versus capitalism and democracy. I think there are quite a few questions to be raised, because the legitimacy of both capitalism and democracy is that both of them are decentralized systems that aggregate quite dispersed information, whether that's prices aggregated by the markets to form certain decisions, or individual votes aggregated by democracy, once again, to shape the future of the society. And AI seems to have a totally different paradigm to that, when the information is centralized and processed in a central way. So almost reopening potential debate about socialism. And I think two main blows can potentially be struck to capitalism first, because the nature of capital changes. Before we had capital separately and thinking labor as a complement to that. You needed a person to man the machine, or at least if the machine was already automated, to think instead of the machine. So there used to be a synergy which encouraged democratic spread, let's say, and fair competition. Now compute is centralized, energy is centralized, inference is centralized. So the whole trend is towards building more oligopolic structures, which touched upon, which will control the way that algorithms think, the way that they get deployed, the way that they get controlled. That's a potential problem with capitalism. For democracy, also a few problems. First of all, in terms of propaganda. Before, propaganda used to be broadcast in a centralized way, but uniformly across populations. Now the marginal cost, I'd say, of a very personalized lie.
Targeted one.
Exactly, a very targeted personalized lie is almost zero. You can lie to any person about anything. First of all, that's manipulating public conscience, but secondly, this gets the liar's dividend of anything can be fake. Anything can be called fake news. So the malicious actors, once again, will manipulate with the truth. And obviously the problem of more centralized control. Once you get all the data on your population, you'll be able to increase the control over the population. And once again, depends on whether they're malicious or a benevolent actor will be in power.
And that's why we are here to discuss education, guardrails, and how it should be built over time in order to build at the end what we want, aligned to the human interests and aims. And now, for example, about judges, teachers, and what do you think? What really people want from AI, Alessandro?
Yeah, I think the question that we have to make, remaining on the social aspect, is how can we still produce in the future good judges, good teachers, good scientists? So how we became professional? We became professional through hard work, through studying, through experience. But if we're starting to delegate AI, also the learning, I think about the new generation. How can they become a good judge? How can they become good professors? So I think we need to answer this question, because I think it's still fundamental to maintain human competencies.
Oh, this is a question to think, not to answer. Lavis, we discussed this thing like the AI is performing really complex tasks. For example, right now there is a research on cancer in several different countries with different AIs in place. But sometimes it does really fail very simple tasks. It does really hallucinate so bad that you think, oh, come on, I cannot really build the whole medical line based on this stupid thing. What do you think? What is going on, really?
The term is called jacked AGI, or jacked AI, if I may, right? The professor in Borton recently coined up, and I couldn't agree more. I think it's the most fundamental piece which defines the state we are in today. And what does that really mean? It says that, first of all, the capability curve is not a curve, it's a coastline, in my opinion, right? And you need to, again, like a coastline, you need to govern and guard the coastline. And how do you, the challenge is, how do you manage that? If you think from I think what's there right now is you have pockets of super intelligence. You will have a model in AI which can solve Olympiad level maths, can solve all your legal issues, can give you a perspective on how your due diligence should happen, absolutely. But there is also that surprising failure that will happen, that does happen. And how do you navigate the two is a challenge that we are facing today. Again, I think I sort of go back in, I think from a company perspective, we need to use all these tools available to know what we are good at, to what AI is good at, and we need to own the decisions ourselves, so we actually manage that. If we think a bit, I think a bit further from where we are today, the companies will continue to build and use AI for the right of competitiveness, and they need to do that. They absolutely need to do that. All the examples that Maren, that you gave from the work standpoint, the employees needs to be encouraged to use as much as you can. That's when only we'll drive the efficiency gains here. But I think again it comes back to the perimeter. So you manage that well.
Yeah, you don't run from the risks. You just meet them and mitigate.
Absolutely.
So as a financial institution, Owen, we are conservative. we are even very often slow, and we tend to, first of all, preserve the existing and then go into another battle. How do we regulate and deploy the AI responsibly?
Yeah, so because AI is coming from this kind of tech company perspective, where they just release the model into the ecosystem, they put a little warning at the bottom and okay, buyer beware. That kind of move fast and break things approach isn't quite as appropriate in banking, for example. So we have all these other considerations. So we have to maintain client trust. We have this very complex regulatory environment to navigate. And even without kind of AI-specific regulations on top of that, we have existing model risk, we have data privacy, cybersecurity, and obviously the reputational risks as well. So, but I would not see these as kind of hindrances to innovation. Rather, they are the kind of table stakes of deploying any type of technology in financial services in our environment. So if anything, it's an opportunity to deploy AI in kind of an innovative way, so that it can operate safely within our kind of requirements, and adding additional protections like guardrails and so on, so that we can use it safely and reliably in our workflows. And at BNY, we've done this directly into the AI project lifecycle. So anytime a team proposes an AI project, they immediately get it registered formally into the system and begin to meet with governance stakeholders from AI governance, risk and compliance, data privacy, legal, engineering governance to see how it will integrate with our existing systems. So that's not an afterthought. It's built into the project lifecycle so that once a project makes it all the way to production, we can be confident that it will work as intended, that the performance will stay steady, even including edge cases and so on, and that even though the AI at the very center is not maybe 100% reliable, the system that we've built around it ensures that it is reliable and we can trust it to use in our financial services landscape.
If I add something to you, Owen, I sort of feel that an ungoverned AI, let's say it's 95% reliable. Let's say it's 95% right. And so in some ways you can say, that's great, right? We can do a lot of things. It's 95% right. But I believe that's a liability, where you have a governed AI, which is, let's say, 60% reliable, 60% right. But that 40% can be brushed by the human. At least you know you're going to get to the right answer. Because in the banking and the regulated industry we are in, that one small non-compliance issue can cost us quite a lot. I'd rather have a governed AI with the human in the loop than to rather have a 95% perfect model, which will potentially get me in trouble for the 5%, because that 5% will be worth billions.
Okay, now given the diversity of markets and jurisdictions where AIs are developed, where the standards are so different, traditions are different, people's perspectives and education is different, and those AIs are developed in those markets, from USA to, many other countries, without naming them. What do you think? Is it possible to really come to a governance that would really cover all those? And can we then also be having an AI that is aligned with human values? When we say human values, it's a nice thing to say, but are they so generic everywhere? And can we really discuss about human values being the same in all jurisdictions, all countries, and all AIs across the world?
Yeah, listen, here you open another Pandora's box. I think when you ask whether...
Sorry for this.
Fair enough, that's why we're here. When we ask about whether we can align AI with human values, I think the values part of the question is more difficult than the alignment, because operational alignment will happen at some point. If we're just afraid that some rogue terminator will decide to obliterate humanity, that's an engineering problem. It can be solved. It's difficult, but it's solvable. The human values, exactly as you pointed out, have never been a coherent target, and especially here now we are in an institution that cares a lot about emerging markets. We raise the problem of AI sovereignty. The models are developed, trained in a certain jurisdiction and then deployed in a totally different jurisdiction with different understanding about what's fair, what's equitable, what's the necessary standard for privacy, what's too risky, etc., etc. Here's an underlying problem. Once again, like who controls the narrative, who does the training. A bigger engineering problem is that the values that are embedded in AI that shape its decisions, it's not something that you bolt on at the end. It's not like you just ask a prompt and say, please exclude all unethical solutions. The AI values are fed to the model during the training, whatever training data it's in. They are fed to the model during the human feedback procedure of the reinforcement learning stage. So whenever a solution is shipped across jurisdiction, especially to the emerging markets that do not have either the capital or the technical capacity to come up with a solution of their own, lots of settings will be set by default. Those emerging markets won't be able to audit, verify, and question certain assumptions, which once again begets the question of sovereignty, of appropriateness. So far, the model that we've come up with, when a few labs across, once again, a few countries in fairly governed jurisdictions deploy the models for the rest of the world, so far it does work because, once again, the solutions are deployed mainly in the markets that have developed them. But if we want to have universal adoption, if we want people in other jurisdictions to trust it more, we need to start asking the questions of who sets the values, whether there is a more, once again, democratic, pluralistic way of setting the thing so that more people can be confident that the answers align with the values that they represent.
So you linked it actually to incentives, right? And now, since we are deeply impacted by the incentives, is it a scientific curiosity that drives the AI development? Sometimes it is. Or it's the maximization of wealth? Or maybe both together. What do you think, Lavi?
I'm going to sit on the fence on this one, right? I don't think I want to choose between commercial success versus curiosity. I think they're both needed, and actually, for me, it's the tension between the two, right, which actually drives us. The curiosity in us helps us to explore the unexplored, right? And how do we try to do various things, do it differently, so we can fundamentally change our operating model, how we are working today. So you need that curiosity. But there's commercial success, right? I think many CFOs might be here in the room and many financial leaders and sort of talking about what's the ROI? I'm going to invest $10 million in here, $15 million in AI. What's my ROI and what I'm going to get? So the real question is, who is winning right now? And if I look at the stats, I think it's very clear the capital discussions are much more stronger these days, right? Every use case that's out there is, let's look, the question that everyone's asking is, what is the value realized if I'm investing this money in, and what am I going to do with it? But then at the same time, you also have money flowing in terms of safety guardrails that's happening, and the argument still stands, and that's why it's a tension between the two. But for me, I think the swing vote stays in this room. It's the decision that you're going to make, and the question I would ask the audience here is that, are you more for, where is your procurement budget? Is it sitting with the 10 use cases, which is going to save the $10 million for you or $100 million for you? Or are we also putting some money aside to explore, to govern, to put the guardrails? And that is your answer. If your answer is sitting in the use case, you have already made the decision. That's your incentive. But you need to have a right balance, and that's the way you need to go about it.
So it's clear we need a kind of FDA for AI, right? Alessandro, what do you think? I mean, in UK, there is a AI Act. In European Union, there is an AI Act, and there are certain already rules defined. It would be interesting if you elaborate us a little bit about prohibited AI practices and regulation and how much enforceable it is and what it means to enforce it. Is this enforceable for the procurer? Is this enforceable for AI agent itself? How it works?
Yes, relating AI Act, I think first of all it's important to say that it's not here for limiting the progress of AI, but it is here for limiting some application and most of all defending fundamental right. So they mark some application as an high risk, for example, application on credit lending or hiring people or giving a life insurance, and they are high risk because they impact people's life. Once we want to access the credit, an AI is deciding we want to control that AI more than in a marketing application. And of course, in Europe, we have prohibited application. This is already in force, and there are some practices, like, for example, social scoring, that we cannot put in force. And I think we as a European with some ethical values, we expect that. We don't want to be judged to our choice during our life and maybe preclude something in the future for maybe some mistake in the past. So I think that we as a European, we give more priority on that than other stuff.
So the social scoring is a good example, right? For example, when you do a scoring based on a video or on a sound or some behavioral context, and that may lead also some other problematic aspects like racial or other limitations in terms of personalities per se. Well, we are human beings, we like anthropomorphizing everything. We talk to the kittens, and then we like giving human shapes to whatever, and we do the same with AI, which might be logical or illogical, but that's what we are, and this is where all these discussions, whether this is an intelligence based on certain algorithm, or this is a consciousness that may outperform humans in the future, and all these discussions are pretty legitimate, and thank you for those. I would suggest, audience, if you have certain questions to address to our speakers. Yes, sure.
Hello, I'm Rostislav Futalo, Chair of the Board of Ardshinbank, Ukraine. Should I repeat?
Yeah.
Ardshinbank, Chair of the Board, Rostislav Futalo, Ukraine. Question, you already touched upon the governance and the risks. Obviously, more practical question, which I have a parallel from another geopolitics, let's say, world. European AI Act, I understand, and why is based on values and so on. All true, but European banks are not in vacuum globally, correct? So this competitiveness question comes in question then, because we have US banks, Asian banks, which are not necessarily complied to EU AI Act. So what's your view on that prospect, because it's a global market? And on top of this question, our dependence on big models, which are, to put it mildly, not necessarily European, right? So to me, it sounds like Europe's dependence on U.S. patriots and troops here against our adversaries. So tomorrow they decide to remove troops. Tomorrow they decide to do something with the models. How European banks specifically see it? Thank you.
I'll take the first part, if I may. So I think for me, right now, a lot of the questions that's being discussed in any acts is the residency question and the data residency, and then the acts try to act for that, and the policies out there, the frameworks out there try to address that. But for me, the real question is sovereignty. And that's where I think leaders like yourself, institutions like yourself, needs to come on board and saying, this is how we're going to tackle that, because that's where you actually truly define the rules of the game for yourselves. And because it's not I think any framework that comes through from EU or whatnot, you can wait for them to catch up. You can wait for yourself to create those rules. But that one, you don't want to become the case study why the rule was created, if I may. And
on the sovereignty question, I think one kind of while the major labs are primarily based in the US and China, they are not entirely kind of closed companies. They are still research labs. And this is a little bit of a holdover from the origins of AI in the academic community. And part of that is sharing their research with the broader community, publishing at conferences and so on, and also releasing slightly older versions of the models as open source that anyone can run on their own private computers. And doesn't matter if the OpenAI servers go down, you can still run your computer. So I think that does show promise for kind of moving away from the US and China-centric view, because these companies are inherently reliant on the academic community to help them progress with this technology. So even though there are thousands of researchers in Anthropic and Google and OpenAI, they can't advance the field alone. They need access to the rest of the community, other people's scrutiny, peer review, and so on. And the only way to do that is to share this technology to a certain extent. And I know the setup at the moment isn't perfect, but I think this kind of paradigm is going to force more and more sharing as we go. And eventually we'll get to the point where we will have open source models that can kind of suit all the major needs in all our businesses, and that will reduce a lot of that risk, I think.
Or maybe just to jump on that, we definitely should progress in that direction. That's not self-guaranteed, though, because unlike all previous technologies that have usually originated in the developed markets and then spread because of economies of scale to emerging markets, AI has the potential of going the other way around, because once again, the technology is very concentrated. It's only scalable once you become an oligopoly. The compute, the energy, the inference, once again, they all tend to be concentrated in the developed markets. So unless we make a conscious effort of trying to democratize access, trying to democratize the training, there is a certain risk that will become highly dependent on a few providers. So this needs to be raised as a question and as a direction to progress.
Yep.
Thank you. My name is Richard. I run a technology company dedicated for the fintech industry. All we do is banking and software. I just want to ask you your opinion about how AI currently excuse me, is being used in some of your banks and the banks that you know. If we divide AI into two big domains, one of them is you ask a question, it gives you the answer, right? The ChatGPT was very famous for this. It started. Many people think this is AI, but some people wonder if it is. You know, it's like an elevated Google of some sort, right? Google search, it gave you things, but now you can ask Google and it gives you a lot more information. And so let's leave that aside. Can you give some examples, and what percentage of the banks you know of today are using the AI in an agent model, where an agent is created by the bank and it really is doing something specific and very well that the bank can depend on it without another chaperone looking and adjusting and fixing it, which is kind of where the ultimate AI is. You know, the concept of AI is we're creating a human artificial intelligence which can operate on its own without mother or father checking into what we did, right? So can you comment on that second part? What have you seen? What percentage of AI things in banks are in this, let's say, the wholly new era of creating and utilizing for their own productivity such AI tools? I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Yeah, if I may. Yeah, I think first of all, we need to differentiate through AI, which is given to depend for their individual productivity. And this is a things. And the other, a program of AI solution that have to go to the production that the company want to build to increase efficiency and to, of course, efficacy. And they are behind a business case, but they are also have measure of control. So we speak a lot about guardrails, but there are also guardian agents. There are many measures, and it is important when to automate a process through agent, make this process auditable. So if an agent make a mistake, maybe it will propagate through the change, but you need to understand well the mistake came out. And this is another perspective. So you need to control this model, but through a program, and this is software. It's not individual productivity like, I don't know, the copilot, okay?
Yes, sure.
In terms of control, because we're talking about banks, and they are regulated in a certain way, and particularly under the central banks and all the regulators. How can you marry another entity? Is that regulated by the central bank? Because it's part of the bank, what you do. So I don't know how you can handle that. At least I don't know myself, but you must have a solution to answer to your question. You cannot go outside the bank because the bank is regulated in a different way, unless the authority, central banks or regulator, can apply the same rules and control to this entity, which is not a bank.
So at BNY, we approach any kind of AI deployment like this with all the considerations of traditional kind of banking regulations. And in particular, we examine the existing process that's maybe done by humans or is kind of semi-automated using very simple approaches. And when we design the AI solution, we design it to be at least as safe as that existing solution. So maybe 98%, or if there's a trade failure, 2% are missed, or something like that. The AI has to at least match that, in addition to having all the other requirements of kind of transparency, that we can understand why it made the decisions it made, guardrails to make sure that it doesn't go haywire if it gets an edge case, ongoing monitoring to make sure that the performance stays stable after we deploy it, and then and these often align with the existing model risk management frameworks that are obviously designed for simpler models, machine learning models, but are being adapted to suit this generative AI. So again, I think it comes down to designing the system around these AI solutions to make sure that they fit in to how we do things at the bank. And I think that's very possible with the current technology we have.
I think we need to relook at the operating models, if I'm being a bit provocative. I think we need to change our ways of working. With this tool, something which can act and not just provide you info, because the older tools give you the information, it does the analysis for you. With agentic AI, you can actually perform the action, and that will force us to relook at our entire operating model. If we're doing this process, it has these 20 steps. We still want to do these 20 steps in the way that we want it to be performed, but with agentic AI, all of that could be sort of automated in some shape or form. So that really looks at when you're thinking of executing your processes and thinking of who does what, you need to have this is what's done by the humans and this is what's done by the agent, and the answer is somewhere in the middle. But that needs to be looked at from a different lens. It's a completely new way of working. You can't say, or if you say, I'm going to run this exactly same thing, but let's use AI for this part and not the other, but you won't get the best efficiency out of it. You need to completely redesign the operating model if you really want to drive the efficiency and competitiveness, in my opinion.
Well, it's clear that there is a huge incentive behind building AIs that would bring more efficiency and effectiveness and do things faster and much better than yesterday. But it seems like there is our collective challenge to not just push the boundaries of what AI can compute or what AI can act upon in the future, but then also to manage to build the systems that can preserve the human agency and human control over this development. I have to say that time runs really fast and we have to conclude here. And thank you for a great discussion and thank you for being a great audience. Thanks a lot. Thank you.